MOSAB Abu Toha, shrapnel looking for laughter. The house has been bombed, everyone dead. The kids, the parents, the toys, the actors on TV, characters in novels, personas in poetry collections. The I, the he, and the she. No pronouns left. Not even for the kids when they learn parts of speech next year. Shrapnel flies in the dark, looks for the family's peals of laughter hiding behind piles of disfigured walls and bleeding picture frames. The radio no longer speaks. Its batteries have burned. The antenna is broken. Even the broadcaster felt the pain when the radio was hit. Even we, hearing the bomb as it fell, threw ourselves to the ground, each of us counting the others around them. We were safe, but our hearts still ache. Hello, dear guests. Good evening. Welcome to the next part of the program. You have probably noticed that I was reading poetry throughout the whole festival, and it is the poetry of MOSAB Abu Toha. And now, with John Freeman, he will present his book, Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear, Poems from Gaza. We also wish a warm welcome to the representatives of the Embassy of the State of Palestine in Bosnia and Herzegovina and His Excellency Ambassador Razak Namura. Also have to say that the book signing will be in the bookstore after the event. Thank you.
Oh, so nice to see everybody here, Your Excellency, MOSAB. One of the joys of coming to Sarajevo and to this festival in particular is the extraordinary writers who come here. And last year or the year before, I was able to sit on this very stage with Adania Shibli. And it's my great honor to be sitting here with MOSAB Abu Toha. The poem that you just heard was written in the poet's second language. And I know that's very common for people growing up here, but from a monolingual culture, sadly, like America, I am in awe of your talent and your ability to sound like yourself in a second language. And I think the poems that MOSAB has been writing since he began as a poet, but the poems that you're about to hear from today and the poems he's about to publish this fall are some of the best poems being written in English today. The music of his language, the imagery, his ability to slide from comfort to discomfort to disquiet, to work in quatrains, in tercets, in couplets, to rhyme, to repeat, and to enchant us into a dream which is a nightmare that we're going to talk about today, which is very present in the poem that you just heard from, because until recently, this man had shrapnel in his body as well. I don't think we should say more than that to begin with, but it's a very happy thing to welcome you here. And I want to start by asking, since I mentioned that this first poem was in English, your second language, if you could recite a poem in Arabic, since that language is your mother tongue.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you, Bokstan. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador. It's my great pleasure to sit on this same table in Sarajevo, in front of you. I want to say something about the poem Shrapnel Looking for Laughter that you read. I wrote this poem in May 2021, just a few days after an airstrike killed a Tanani family, a family of two parents and their 4 children who were running away from their house when there was a bombing, but they were killed at the door. So a whole family was exterminated by the Israeli airstrike. And I was standing against the window in my house when that happened. The next morning, I realized what happened that night. So I wrote that poem, Shrapnel Looking for Laughter, about the kids, what they were doing before the bombing. And the shrapnel, which is a metaphor for death, was running not only after their bodies, but even after their laughter, because death and war hates even the joyful moments that people had before they died. You asked me to read a poem in Arabic. So just for your information, I write in both languages separately. This collection, Things You May Find in My Ear, was written in English. And this collection, which was written in Arabic, hasn't been translated into any other language. So I'm going to read a poem that's called Ayyuha al-Maut, O Death. I'm not going to translate it, but I want you to listen to the sound of the Arabic language, just to honor the language of the so many people who are killed as we are talking. أيها الموت، ألا تتعب وأنت تركض خلف سيارة تدفعها بيديك الشبحيتين نحو المنحدر، تحلق نحو طائرة وترطمها بالإسفلت؟ ألا تسمع صوت الأطفال يرتعدون والأمهات، صوت المنبه عندما يرن ولا يصحو عليه أحد؟ ألا تشعر بالندم؟ ربما يجب أن تنتظر قليلا وتطفئ المنبه قبل أن تغادر باحثا عن ساعات أخرى توشك على إيقافها. أيها الموت، هل تبدل ملابسك؟ هل ثيابك في الصيف تختلف عنها في الشتاء؟ هل تتعطر عندما تذهب تصطحب أميرا؟ هل تغتسل؟ ألم تصبك شظية في الحرب أو رصاصة طائشة؟ هل تغار منا عندما نمارس الحب يوميا؟ لماذا لا تطرق الباب عندما تدخل؟ ألم تقرأ دق الباب قبل الدخول؟ ربما لا تعرف القراءة جيدا، لكنك تعرف الوجوه جيدا حتى قبل أن تنضج. أيها الموت، لا تفرح، يوما ما لن تجد أحدا على الأرض تضع روحه في حقيبتك المهترئة. سيأتي اليوم وتشعر بالملل، وسيشهد الغيم كيف تقتل نفسك قرب مقبرة، لكن لا أحد هناك ليدفنك، ولن يصلي عليك أحد. شكرا. Thank you.
So you were, MOSAB, you were born in 1992 in Shati refugee camp, and you grew up in Gaza. I'm curious, who taught your ear to hear the way it hears? Because you hear the uncanniness within language. And I feel like one of your character traits as a poet is that you hear the fractures in words, the way they slip away from you. And I'm curious, was it your grandfather, your father? You never met your grandfather, whom you write about. What was it like growing up where you did, and was there poets about?
When I was a child, I had some problems in my ear, and this is why the book is called Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear, because during COVID, I had a surgery on my right ear because there was some puncture in my ear, so I had the surgery. So I wrote this poem, so this is the story of the poem. I wrote the first half of the poem, and I may want to read it after that. So I wrote the first half of the poem to my doctor, asking her to, even after she opens my ear, because she's going to encounter and find so many things, the voice of my mother, the English poem that I recited to myself in the backyard, etc., and the sound of the chirping birds, etc. And I asked her, before she stitched the cut, I asked her to put everything back in order. So I sent her the message. I sent her this message. I still have it. She said, "Oh, you are a gifted poet." And then I was encouraged to continue writing the poem. The second half of the poem is about things that I'm asking her to get rid of, which are the sounds of the F-16, the bullets, the screaming of people, you know. And then to inject my ear to wake me up. No, to inject my body to wake me up from anesthesia with the Song of Love or the Song of Life. So I think maybe my struggle with my ear as I grew up made me very attentive to every sound, because my hearing ability was not that great. So I had to pay attention to the smallest sound, maybe to the sound of an ant trying to sleep in winter on a rug, that my uncle used to pray on. So I think this sensitivity came to me because I had to filter the sounds that were barely heard. And the fact that we in Gaza have had this big number of drones flying over our heads. I mean, there's a book by Atif Abu Saif called The Drone Eats With Me. I mean, come on. I mean, because the drone is with us every single minute. So he says, the drone eats with me. And I would say this, I don't want, but the drone sleeps with us in our sense these days. I mean, if you listen to some conversations with people from Gaza these days, you would hear the drone buzzing louder than their voices. So, and also I want to add, before ending this prolonged answer, by saying that I was born in a refugee camp called Ash-Shati camp, to which my grandfather and his brothers moved when they were expelled from Jaffa in 1948. I grew up there for about 9 years before moving to Beit Lahia, which is in the north of Gaza. So I think I'm trying to understand myself, not as a poet, but as a human being, that this move, this big move from a refugee camp where you can walk in a 1 meter wide lane, you could hear what your neighbors are talking about, what they are teaching their children for school, what they are cooking, what they are fighting over. So this is a very, very small and condensed place. And then moving to Beit Lahia, which is the complete opposite, which has great farmlands. So I remember when we moved to Beit Lahia, there was maybe a few hundred meter fields of eggplants, of strawberries, of lemon trees. And if you have the English copy of this book, this is a picture that I took through a hole in the wall after the 2014 Israeli attacks. So I took this picture, and it looks like an ear. Before even I thought of using it as a poem, as a cover. And you could see through this picture some lemon trees, some citrus fruit trees. So I think this movement from the refugee camp to an agricultural area like Beit Lahia made me notice the difference and pay attention to everything.
Was your father a farmer?
No. So my father was a teacher. But my uncle, my father-in-law is a strawberry farmer. But my father loved to farm. In 2010, my father bought a plot of land just next to our house, and now he built a small room of 10 sheets next to our bombed house. So in that small area, he grew, along with my mother, of course. My father couldn't do anything alone, so my mother had to help him with everything. So we had some mango trees, some peach trees, some pears, some eggplants, some pepper. Everything that you want, you can just go down and pick anything. And he loved, even when we were in the refugee camp, he used to grow pigeons, ducks, hens, and even when we moved to Beit Lahia, he still had those birds around him. My father, before our house was bombed in October 2023, used to go, after we evacuated our house, he used to go back to our house in the morning just to feed the pigeons, the rabbits, the ducks that he had. And luckily, our house was bombed at night, not during the day, because my father was in the refugee camp sleeping in the house with us. So luckily, because my father was really caring about these birds and animals. So he rested. It was a dangerous area, but my father would go to water whatever survived of the plants and the trees, and to water the pigeons and feed them. So that's my father.
I was wondering if one of the many beauties of reading this book in particular is how you get to know MOSAB's family, his grandfather, his father, his late brother. Yeah. We get to know you. We lived through aerial bombardments with you. We look through cracks in the ceiling at the moon with you. But we also eat with you and your family. And I wonder if you could read a poem called Everyday Meals During Wars, because I think people here might relate to it.
I mean, every poem in this book could be written today and yesterday and tomorrow. Unfortunately, when I go back and read some poems now, even to you, I feel like I'm reliving them, but at the same time, I ask myself, why haven't this stopped? Why is this poem not this genocide? Why is this poem happening again? So shrapnel looking for laughter. I'm talking about, shrapnel looking after shrapnel running after the laughter of the children. But these days in this war, it's really more horrible than that. I mean, there are no children. I just posted yesterday a video, and I showed it to you, of what remained of a girl. It was only the nose and the eyes, nothing in the body. So the shrapnel were not looking for the laughter or maybe the arm. Nothing remained of the girl except for her, just the front of her face, no head. So I keep returning to my poems, and even some of the poems in my forthcoming poetry book, and they keep happening. My only hope was that after I write these poems, that, okay, I put an end to them by putting them on paper. That's it. That's it. Okay, so this poem, Everyday Meals. Yes, I found it. 53. Everyday meals, طبعا. Now, there are no meals in Gaza because people are being starved. They are not starving, but they are made to starve by the Israeli army and the siege that has been imposed since 2007. So I wish this poem could happen. I'm satisfied with this poem if it's happening today. Everyday meals during wars. In previous wars, our neighbors would share meals with us in our basement. My brother would start a fire in the old brazier, and I would prepare tea and put the kettle on the burning coals. There were truces every couple of days. My father could go out and check on the hens and ducks in their coops. My mother would climb the ladder to the roof to put water in bowls for the sparrows and pigeons. Men would be taken to jails or concentration camps. They could see those who were fighting and killing them and their families. Nowadays, we don't see those who take everything beautiful away from us. We don't even see our shadows during the day. The F-16s swallow the light from the sun, casting the shadows of their fat bellies on us, dead or alive. Bombs punch the houses, knock them down, smash the fridges and the dishes. A house turns into a stew of concrete and blood. We no longer share meals with the neighbors.
I wanted you to read that poem in part because you mentioned to me that in our last conversation, you wished that aspect of what is happening currently in Gaza, the fact that Gazans and people in Palestine are being effectively starved by the Israelis, didn't come up. And I feel like I want to ask you now, to the side of these poems, what aspect of how the past period, the past 9 months, which obviously is about the last 75 years, is not being framed well, and how would you frame it for us?
What's happening these days? I think one of the things that the people do not realize is that we used to have a few hours of electricity, some hours of water. But by the way, I mean, in order to pump water from the underground to the water tanks on the roofs, you need to have electricity. So sometimes we have electricity, but the water is not on. So we had a few hours of life, I would say. But after October 7th, Israel decided to cut off the water, to cut off electricity. And then they started to target internet centers, telephone centers, so that people, even if someone was bombed in their houses, and let's say they stuck under the rubble, breathing, okay, so a multi-floor building has collapsed after an airstrike, and some of the people, and it happened, people were, trying to shout or call to people under the rubble. So just imagine yourself being stuck under the rubble of your house, imagine that you are still alive, and your phone, there is no battery in your phone, and let's say there is battery in your phone, and you try to call, there is no phone signal, and even if you call the ambulance, there is no fuel for the ambulance to come to your rescue. And this is what's happening in Gaza for 9 months. People died in the streets after the Israeli soldiers sniped them, and they were left in the street. A few weeks after, let's say there is a ceasefire, the Israeli army withdrew from a certain area, people would return to the streets to find decayed bodies, just skeletons, and people would recognize whether this was A or B or C. From their clothes, they would recognize them from a watch on the bone, not on the hands, but on the bone. So what's happening these days in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank are not new things. But Israel is intensifying their attacks and brutalizing the Palestinian people in an unprecedented way. And this is different. Why? Because it's happening live as we talk. Not live that we are watching, but because the Palestinians are live streaming to us. I'm talking about Palestinians as if I'm one of them. So I was posting online at the moment of the bombing. I remember from week 1, I posted, the post is still there on my Facebook account. I said Israel has cut off electricity and water, and we don't have enough food. That was week 1. And just imagine, just 3 or maybe 3 months ago, the United States kindly started to drop food, not for people, but on people. While, on the other side, they ship weapons to Israel decently, just like you ship, maybe a package of books to your friend. They would arrive, decently to soldiers who would drop these bombs on people who are running after food. I just want you to imagine this. This is really Hollywood, or it doesn't happen in Hollywood, really. But it continues to happen, and I think the American administration is not ashamed of what they are doing. They try to, convince us that they are sending food. They are asking Israel, to minimize the civilian casualties. But to the opposite, many more. I won't say people, but families. So I'm talking here about not, let's say, MOSAB was killed in an airstrike. No, MOSAB and his mother and his father and his children and his cousins. By the way, before our house was bombed, 4 stories. 4 floors. It's just one piece. I lived in that house with my wife and 3 kids, and on the second floor. On the first floor, there was my father and mother and sister. On the 3rd floor, there was my brother, his wife, and 3 children, and his wife was pregnant. And on the top floor was my brother and his wife. They don't have children. And sometimes people say, oh, thank goodness I don't have children, to rescue. Just imagine people thanking God that they don't, have children. And the 3rd day or 4th day of October 7th, my sister and her husband and their 3 children moved to stay with us because a house next to them was bombed. And then a younger sister of mine with her daughter and husband, her daughter was 2 months old, they moved to stay with us. I just want you to imagine that on October 29th, I was in that house with my wife and my parents and my siblings, and about 25 people would have been killed, more than half of whom were children. The youngest of them was 2 months old, and the wife of my brother was pregnant. I still come back to this. What happened here? And I was kidnapped by the Israeli army, trying to go to the south of Gaza. I was kidnapped for about 53 hours. 53 hours is very, very long. When you are blindfolded and handcuffed and you don't know what these soldiers, they hit me, they beat me, they harassed me. And now when I think about people, doctors and university professors who was kidnapped from school shelters they were staying at, or hospitals, and they were released after 7 months. And some of them, like Dr. Adnan al-Burj, who is one of the top surgeons in Gaza, died in prisons. But after I was released, one of the Israeli soldiers, of course I say this to you, that I was released after a lot of pressure that what was put on the Israelis by a lot of people in the United States especially. But the Israeli soldiers said, sorry about the mistake. You are going home. And I'm now thinking to myself, what if on October 29th, I was in my house with all my family, and the house was bombed, and I was killed, not me, everyone in my family. Would there be any Israeli soldier saying to me, sorry about the mistake? And I'm sure that this is the case of maybe 99% of the houses that were bombed by the Israelis. Maybe they had false information about someone, or they just want to kill. This is their desire. It's just to get rid of as many Palestinians as possible. This is what I believe in, because this is what I saw. In one airstrike, just before I finish, it was October 31st. So just 2 days after our house was bombed, there was an airstrike in Jabalia camp where we moved to, an area called close to Al-Tluli roundabout in Jabalia camp. And there was a bombing, and I have a video of me and my family, crazily moving around. The bombing was very close. I went out, and just about 700 meters away from us, a complete neighborhood, more than I would say 20 or 30 houses were leveled to the ground. And more than 400 people were either killed or injured. In 10 minutes, in 10 seconds, just they go. And I'm sorry to say this, but while I was running, I like to take pictures and videos. So I opened my camera and started to run in the street. One thing that I saw, for real, next to an ambulance, they put someone in a blanket because there are no enough stretchers even, you know. So when we die even, there is no humanity in our death. We are put in a blanket. I saw someone being carried on a door that was, you know, removed from a house or from a bombed house. They put someone who was injured on it. And I likened it to a door moving while the neighbors were the wall. So your neighbors were running wall. So I saw a man with no head. That was the first time in my life. And I can't forget this.
I was going to ask you where your surrealism comes from, but you just answered that question emphatically. This image MOSAB just described of the man traveling on a door is in a poem in your forthcoming book, which is called Forest of Noise. It's coming this fall. I want to ask you to talk a little bit about the difference between writing poems for that book versus writing poems for this book, because you've just described to us some of the circumstances that you've lived through in the last 9 months, having your house bombed. You had founded the Edward Said Library in Gaza. There were 2 branches. Those were bombed and destroyed. You've been kidnapped, been released. You got yourself and your family to Cairo. You lived there in a kind of interregnum period, and now you've moved to Syracuse for a fellowship with your whole family.
Yeah.
Somehow, I will never, ever, ever complain about writer's block after knowing what you've been able to write a book of poems through. But you also were living through similar but different things as you were writing things you may find hidden in my ear. Can you describe the different experiences?
I mean, there are, of course, different experiences. After this book was published in 2022. So at least a year and a half before October 7th. So when you go and read this book, you realize that what's happening now is not what Israel is doing to Palestinians in Gaza and even in the West Bank is not something that they do as a reaction to October 7th. They have been doing this to us decades even before October 7th. So this is one thing. There are experiences that I had after this book was published. For example, being kidnapped by the Israeli army. I wrote a long poem called On Your Knees, because the only sentence I could hear from the Israeli soldiers in Arabic, على ركبك, on your knees, don't move. Don't even sit on your butt, not allowed. I had a stiff in my thigh, having to be kneeling, on my knees for a long, long time. Just imagine, I mean, I spent 53 hours there, not 53 days, not even 5 or 6 months. And I want to tell you something. Many of the people who were kidnapped and who was released a few months, let's say, I know someone who was kidnapped 2 days before me, and he was released just 2 weeks ago. Just imagine not only the pain that he had during his condition of being kidnapped, but the news that he will hear. Oh, your uncle was dead with his family. This is real. Just 8 months, no news. Just imagine how much of tragic news he will get. So being detached from the real world by being blindfolded 24/7 and being blindfolded. And I was just on the phone with a friend of mine this morning. He told me many things, but he told me that, MOSAB, if you just look at the people who were just released, they only feed them a crumb of bread, and so with some jam. That's it. I don't want to tell you how they torture them, but I mean, these people who were kidnapped, they had nothing on them, but the Israelis took them as hostages. They took them just to make them hate them more. So we already hate the Israeli soldiers. So I don't know. I mean, they are creating more and more hate, not from the Palestinian people, but from the whole people of the world, when they watch what is happening and that their tax money is going to fund this genocide. So I don't want to wander off, but But if this book of poems has 1 ton of shrapnel, and I don't want to say more, the second book would have more shrapnel in it, because the size of destruction, the level of bombardment is unprecedented. Israel is not killing people. I want to say this. Israel is killing cities. They are killing neighborhoods. If you watch videos, you would see Israel wiring houses with explosives and blow them up. And then when they would shout with joy, "This is for my granddaughter on her birthday." They are getting revenge not on Hamas, but on the Palestinian people, and on their houses, and on their streets, on their universities and the clinics, and on their sea, by putting an American pair that was used to evacuate some hostages that were, released by, who were again kidnapped by the Israeli army, by killing 200 other civilians in Gaza. So this book is, I won't say that it's unique, but I would say that there is, unfortunately, للأسف, there is more trauma in it because of the trauma I went through.
You come from a people that write a lot of poems. Mahmoud Darwish was one of your favorites. You have a lot of varieties of poems in this book. You have some longer poems, you have some shorter poems, you have some very short poems. And I wondered if you could read one of the very short ones called "A Rose Shoulders Up." It's on page 99.
Yeah, okay. This is just a 4-line poem. A rose shoulders up. Don't ever be surprised to see a rose shoulder up among the ruins of the house. This is how we survive. Thank you so much.
I'm going to open up to questions from you in about 2 minutes. But I want to ask you, we've known each other a little bit. I was lucky enough to work with MOSAB on his upcoming book. And we're talking about things you care about a lot, that you've seen that are terrible. And so the tone of our conversation is emphatic and serious, of course. But in other moments, I've seen you be silly. I've seen you be matter of fact. We had an event in benefit for to restart the Edward Said Library on Zoom, and you predicted what would happen to a T 6 months ago, 5 months ago. You said they're going to push everyone into Rafah, and then they're going to bomb them in Rafah and try to push everyone out. How do you maintain your equilibrium, your sense of your ability to move from a conversation like the one we're having to one with your family, so that you can be yourself and you can be with your family and not take out on them what's being taken out on you?
Yeah, I think this is part of my nature, and I think this is a way of resistance. So if there's, no matter how much Israel wreak havoc and destroy us in Palestine, we always find moments of joy. Even when I talk to my friends in Gaza these days, who are living in tents for months, they joke with me. They remind me of funny moments. I ask them some questions and they ask, in a silly way. So these people are in Gaza in tents, living in tents. But come on, you don't expect them as Palestinians, because to be a Palestinian means to never give up. And for them to have this sense of humor, on my Facebook, on my Instagram, I can see some posts from my friends making fun of some of what's happening in Gaza, even though they lost a lot of members of their families. They still have some moments, because they can't just be gloomy all the time. They can't be crying all the time. Of course, they would find some moments of joy, some moments of silliness. They would talk about taboo things, even during the genocide, because this is how they continue to live. If they are going to give up and say, okay, we are going to die tomorrow, then they won't be running away from, after the food parcels that America is dropping on them. So they continue to do this because this is part of them. No matter what Israel does, they will continue to be who they are. And this is part of me, to have this sense of humor sometimes. But not, of course, when I'm under the bombardment, not when I'm blindfolded and handcuffed. But I don't know, maybe some people who are now kidnapped and blindfolded and handcuffed, maybe they have some jokes, I'm sure. Maybe a week or 3 weeks after they were kidnapped, even when the Israeli soldiers are around them, I'm sure they have some jokes together. Because this is part of what it means to be human.
I have a feeling that the audience relates. There's 15 minutes left. I dearly want you to be able to ask questions of MOSAB. I'm going to start with you.
So I had a question. We were talking about the language in your books before. Do you now write in Arabic and in English, or do you ever translate from Arabic to English? And if you do separate those two and have them like separate actions, how does it feel to write in English as per se in Arabic?
Good question. So I write separately. So as I mentioned, these poems were written in English. They are not even translated into Arabic. But sometimes, because some of my friends love my Arabic poetry, so they ask me to read them new poems in English. So I would translate to them, and they have similar feelings. I don't want to brag and say, oh, they love English and Arabic poetry. But when I write in Arabic, I write in my position as a human being, not as someone from Gaza, mainly. By the way, for the past 9 months, I haven't written anything in Arabic because of the immediate need for me to write in English. Not only poems, but also essays and some Facebook posts and Instagram posts, etc. So the immediacy of the situation compels me to write in English. And when I write in English, I know that I'm talking to my Bosnian friends and my American friends and Europe and Britain, etc. So I'm talking to them in English, and I feel like they are listening to me, and I give them details that they don't see on TV. But when I write in Arabic, just like the poem I read to you about death. So I'm not talking about death as part of our lives in Gaza only. No, I'm talking about death as a phenomenon. A phenomenon. About death taking our lives without even paying respect to the alarm clock when it rings. And I'm talking in Arabic here about, are you not embarrassed? Are you not ashamed of yourself when you take someone's life and then hear the alarm clock sounding? Maybe you should wait a little bit and turn off the alarm before you leave, taking more lives with you. So here I'm talking about death not as a result of war, just like in Gaza, but as a matter of fact that everyone of us will experience. This is our destiny. So this is the difference between Arabic and English.
Thank you.
So, hi, good evening, and thank you for being here. First of all, I want to say I find your poetry both haunting and stunning. I'm happy to be reading it and very sorry to be reading it in these circumstances. My question was, all things considered, rather silly. So I want to know, once Palestine is free, inshallah, what do you hope to be writing about? What are you yearning for the most from this perspective?
Thank you so much. I pray for that, but I cannot promise you that I will be a writer. Maybe I will find another job. maybe planting strawberries for Rif'at's soul. Rif'at loved strawberries, so I might maybe start a farming company dedicated to Rif'at's beloved fruit, which is strawberries. But if I live to that moment, and if I continue to be a writer, my second hobby, no, it's not a hobby. I mean, writing is not a hobby. It's a responsibility. But I mean, I would find maybe another light thing like taking pictures and following maybe a spider, creating a net in the street under an orange tree maybe. So I love taking pictures, and I have about 50,000 photos on my phone right now. But for the last 9 months, mainly from Gaza, videos and photos that I took. So taking photo, maybe I would learn to be a professional photographer. I love singing in Arabic. My voice is good, yani, not bad. So I might be a singer. Yes, I can sing, but so I might be a singer, I'm not sure. And I like soccer ball. So I could play soccer ball and I can learn. I can ask my children now to teach me new skills. So, but I think writing is not only about Palestine, but I would like to write more broadly about human universal issues, not necessarily about Palestine, but also things that have to do with our common painful experiences that we go through, regardless of our ethnicities or religion, etc. Thank you.
One more question, yes.
One more. This is the last one? MOSAB, we are so proud of you, and we are proud that we are Palestinians because of you. And, you know, I'm so happy that you survived and you are representing all the poets who died in Gaza and all Palestine. I always wonder if Mahmoud Darwish is still alive, what's the poem that he could, you know, present to us, because it's really hard to describe our feelings in Arabic language. This is what I want, you know, to shed the light on. Speaking in English for Arabic people or Arab people is easier to describe our feelings, you know, comparing to the Arabic language because it's more poetic and more deep. And for us, it's so hard now to speak about our feelings since the war is still going on. We have like a responsibility and we have a duty to do, to speak about the pain of our people. And this is what I share with you as a diplomat. And this is what I love about the Palestinian people.
People in Gaza. Again, about Arabic and English, I haven't written a single poem in the Arabic language because if I want to talk to Arab people, my fellow Palestinians or Egyptians or Syrians, etc., I won't tell them the same details that I'm sharing with non-Arab speakers or people who do not live with me in Palestine. I think the amount of details that I take care of in my English poem would be different from the details that I would share with my fellow Arab people. So I cannot find myself in the Arabic these days. I can talk in Arabic, of course, but I haven't been able even to write an essay in Arabic because I need to talk to as many people around the world who have access and who could decipher my English poems more quickly.
Oh, I would love to talk to you for another hour. Just one tiny detail, which is these questions were fantastic, but you'll notice that in response to your question, that MOSAB instinctually paid tribute to Rafat and rewrote his poem, the famous poem, If I May Die. If I Must Die. You just basically extemporized If I Must Live. And I think the genius that MOSAB has in his imagination and his heart is evident on every page of this book, but also in every time you speak to him. So please continue to speak to him by buying his book and reading these poems. And he's going to sign them generously here. You're going to tell us where they're going to get the books are going to be outside. So please go get them, and he'll sign them, and we can continue this event outside. MOSAB Abu Toha,
thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John.